What happens when a legendary country music star, known for her iconic voice and incredible spirit, strolls onto a talk show expecting an easy conversation about her new record, but is instead ambushed by a host who wants to drag her through the cesspool of politics? Because believe me, you're about to witness one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime television history. Joy Behar thought she was going to run all over Reba McEntire, but instead, she was served with the reality check of a lifetime. This is the story of how a country music queen brought an overconfident talk show host to her knees, leaving the audience stunned and in awe. But before we reveal the exact words that silenced the studio, make sure you smash that subscribe button and drop your opinion in the comment section below, because believe me, you are going to have so many things to say about this train wreck of a segment. It was another bright morning on the View Studios, and none other than country music legend Reba McEntire was scheduled to appear on the show. Already present was the queen herself, her vibrant red hair impeccably coiffed and dressed in a chic navy blazer that exuded pure class. She was there, as per usual, to talk about her upcoming tour and, of course, her music. The same she had promoted on numerous shows for decades now. However, she had no idea, as she sat and fiddled with her microphone, that Joy Behar had other plans in store for her that day. In 30 seconds, chirped the floor manager, and the set was soon filled with hurried yet organized chaos. Reba, who has a soft spot for the show and usually had a blast chatting with the co-hosts, gave everyone her signature bright smile, with Whoopi Goldberg offering a friendly nod. However, even as the stage directions were being called, a subtle tension seemed to be in the air, and Reba couldn't quite place what it was. And that is when the clock struck. It is at this point, sitting there, knowing that you're about to get completely blindsided, right before your very eyes on live TV. Live in 3, 2, signaled the floor manager as the familiar theme music fades. "Welcome back to The View," began Joy, with her trademark smirk. "We have a true legend in the house today, country music icon Reba McEntire. Reba, I know you have a new tour kicking off, and I was hoping before we dive deep into your musical endeavors, you could maybe share with the viewers how you're standing on some of the important issues facing working families in America right now." Reba's smile wavered, just a tad. She was clearly not prepared for this question, not even remotely close. However, take a look at how smoothly she deflects it. Taking a breath, she answered in her characteristic warm and welcoming tone. "Well, Joy, my focus is here today to talk about my music and connecting with the fans who have shown me support for so long." But that wasn't good enough for Joy Behar. It seemed as though she was just warming up. "Oh, come on now," Joy persisted, leaning in with that familiar gleam in her eyes. "You are such a huge figure with tremendous influence. You surely must have a political opinion to share. I mean, let's face it, your fan base is overwhelmingly conservative." The bait was laid. Joy's objective was clear: to extract a political headline, using Reba as her unwilling pawn. What happens next is pure media attack mastery. Rural America, right? It's been that same group of people voting against their own best interest for years. The studio audience stirred and settled in their seats. Even Whoopi Goldberg's eyebrows shot up at the blunt and aggressive opening. Reba leaned back a bit, straighter, because having performed on stages all over the world, she knew when a conversation had shifted into a hostile environment. But if Joy thought she was going to spook the legendary country singer, she was dead wrong. "Joy, I think you're making some assumptions about the people who support my music, and I don't think those assumptions are entirely fair," Reba calmly responded. "My audience is comprised of people from all walks of life. They are teachers, nurses, farmers, business owners, and families from the military, among so many others. These are hardworking people who have a great deal of love in their hearts for their families. But here's the reality," Joy interrupted and didn't back down. "These are the same people who continue to support politics that disenfranchise working women and women in general, and continue to deny the realities of climate change. So how do you justify entertaining an audience with so backward of a value system?" The whole studio was eerily silent aside from the hum of the camera crew and the hushed click of the lens mechanism. This was a bold and direct insult to millions of people that made up her fans, and it was a test intended to corner her. Reba's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but when she finally spoke, she was never louder, nor did her voice rise as she responded in a way that redefined the entire conversation. "Joy, I think you are confusing political generalizations for real human beings. The fans who come to my concerts, for example, are not defined by the way that you choose to assume that they vote. The men who go to my concerts are fathers who are working 2 jobs to try and keep food on the table. The women are mothers who want what is best for their children. And the young people want to know what their purpose will be in this country." It was a beautifully orchestrated defense of everyday Americans. But Joy was not interested in common ground, and it became immediately obvious she was looking for an argument. I'm sorry that's such a beautiful cop-out, but we both know how problematic the genre of country music is when it comes to inclusivity and representation, and there's no need to talk around the fact that historically the establishment has excluded artists of color. Don't you feel responsible for using your voice to call attention to this fact? This was no longer a tense conversation. It was an interrogation. And at this point, the sweet southern charm began to fall away, revealing a spine of pure steel. Reba's eyes narrowed as she looked directly at Joy. Joy, you need to do your research before you begin throwing around accusations. The genre of country music has always been deeply influenced by blues and gospel. All different kinds of people have made their contributions, and the presence of artists like Charlie Pride, Darius Rucker, Mickey Guyton, and Kane Brown are nothing to be scoffed at. These artists aren't tokens, and they all deserve to have a voice in this industry. Well, historically, Joy began, seemingly completely oblivious to the flashing red lights of how much she was pushing Reba. The institution of country music has always been an institution built for exclusion. Joy persisted, completely oblivious to the facts Reba had just laid out, and soon would realize that cornering the legendary Reba McEntire on live TV was not where one wanted to be. And honestly, the silence that you kept about social justice issues has been so loud. When Black Lives Matter was at its highest point, where was Reba McEntire's voice? The temperature of the studio dropped about 10 degrees. Leaning forward, Reba kept her voice entirely controlled, but with such a sharp edge that everyone in the room immediately focused on her. My silence, Joy? You clearly have no idea about my career, or how I've lived my life. I've spent 40 years volunteering for charity causes, building programs for underprivileged children, and using my voice and platform to help others, no matter what they look like. I don't have to stand on the mountaintop and proclaim every little good deed I've ever done on social media to feel important. Joy's face was beginning to turn beet red, realizing that the usual intimidation tactics she used were not working on the country icon. Well, it certainly makes it easy to hide behind charity work rather than take political stances on controversial topics, doesn't it? Joy sneered, doubling down. Your fans deserve to know where you stand on the issues that concern them, and what makes you think they don't know. Reba's voice grew louder and louder by the second. Her Oklahoma roots were starting to break through the polished country music persona. You're telling me what my fans believe, what they think, and what they deserve. When was the last time you even talked to one of them? When was the last time you took a trip to any small-town America and sat with a family who are struggling to understand what they're going through and listened to them instead of lecturing them? The other women were exchanging nervous glances. This was way off track. Joy's interview was completely losing control. Whoopi Goldberg attempted to clear her throat, sensing the urgency in the room and knowing that a commercial break needed to happen. But Joy was already too invested in this fight to back down. I do not have to go to small-town America to realize that the voters you appeal to vote for politicians who do not care about women's rights, environmental rights, and basic social progress, Joy declared, voice cracking with frustration. And by your silence, you have shown that you are in alignment with these people. This was the point when everything changed. The sweet, polite country singer was gone. Standing there instead was a self-made billionaire woman who built an entertainment empire from the ground up on her own two hands. And there was no way anyone was going to bring down her hard-worked career and insult the people who stood by her all of these years. In one calm, terrifying, deliberate movement, Reba gently placed her coffee cup down. Then, she began to speak. The small, ceramic clink of the cup against the table sliced through the tension like a sharp razor. Reba looks back at Joy, the intensity in her eyes that makes the entire studio hold its breath. This is not the polite guest who entered the studio that morning. This is a woman who has navigated the ruthless world of entertainment for decades by knowing exactly when to hold her ground. Joy, let me tell you what complicity is, Reba starts, her voice a level, low tone laced with the enormity of barely contained fury. Complicity is sitting in your plush studio in New York City, making six figures to pass judgment on people that you don't know, and pretend like you're speaking on behalf of the working families of America. Complicity is thinking that anybody that doesn't think exactly like you think is automatically ignorant or evil. Joy starts to open her mouth to interrupt, but Reba raises a single finger in a gesture of absolute authority, silencing Joy immediately and commanding the attention of everyone in the studio and watching at home. No, you've had your say. I'm going to have mine now, Reba continues, her tone unwavering. You want to speak on behalf of my fans? Let me tell you about Sarah from Tennessee, who works 3 jobs and saved up for months to be able to bring her daughter to my concert, just to let her and her daughter escape for 3 hours from all of the problems in their lives. Or perhaps you would like to discuss Frank from Iowa, who is struggling with PTSD from being in the armed services and finds peace in country music that reminds him of home. These are real people with real lives and real problems, and these are not characters in a caricature that you are trying to build of them. The live audience is enraptured, leaning forward in their seats, the camera operators seemingly frozen on the spot, terrified to miss a single second of this unprecedented, unscripted takedown. Joy attempts to regain control of her own program. Look, I'm not attacking your fans directly, but at the end of the day, these things all fall into the umbrella of larger political issues. Reba immediately interrupts with, well, larger political issues, or the fact that the elite in coastal regions have decided what the middle of America ought to be thinking and feeling. Seeing the interview going completely off the rails, Whoopi tries to step in. Ladies, perhaps we should. No, Whoopi, Joy snaps, desperately trying to salvage some composure. I want to hear why Reba is being so silent when she can actually speak to an entire generation that she can reach on something other than her songs. Reba laughs, a short, sharp sound that is as cold as ice. Why Reba is being so silent? You're sitting here assuming that everybody who doesn't speak exactly like you speak needs to be educated. That's not education. That is indoctrination. That is an insult to millions of people who have the wherewithal to be able to figure things out for themselves. But Joy, unwilling to concede defeat, throws out one final desperate point. But surely, Reba, there are certain issues that are black and white. What happens next is an unforgettable mic drop that leaves Joy Behar utterly speechless. Joy pressed on, now sweating on her forehead. Human rights, equality, human decency, that's not opinion, Reba, that's a moral truth. And you are correct, Reba responded. For a brief moment, relief flooded Joy's face. She was beginning to believe she'd have victory, but she could not be further from the truth. Reba was setting her up for the greatest downfall possible. It is a moral truth, Reba said, her voice rising, which is why I am completely appalled that you claim ownership over it. Joy, tell me, when was the last time you went to a food bank in rural America? When was the last time you volunteered at a homeless shelter outside of Manhattan? When was the last time you truly got your hands dirty and made a tangible impact on the communities you pretend to care so much about? Joy's face flushed an even deeper scarlet. I am involved in numerous charities and causes, she stuttered. Writing a check from your penthouse doesn't compare to the real world, Reba quickly shot back, refusing to allow her to maneuver around the question. You sit here every day spouting off about America's problems and live in your own echo chamber with people who do not offer any form of dissent. How can you claim to understand working Americans' needs when you haven't lived amongst them for decades? The other hosts were beginning to perspire uncontrollably in their seats. This wasn't just a regular heated exchange any longer. This was an absolutely brutal and intensely personal taking down of a media star, all happening live on air. I take great offense to being called out of touch, Joy shrieked, her professional facade crumbling in an instant. I came from a working-class background. I understand struggle. Did you? The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. The entire tone of the room had just completely shifted, and Joy was no longer in control. It looked like this whole debate was turning into an interrogation of her, not the other way around. Because what I am witnessing, Reba said, locking eyes with Joy, is that you seem to have forgotten your roots. You have traded genuine emotion for applause lines, your true feelings for cheap political points, and that working-class woman would be utterly ashamed of who you have become. An almost deafening silence filled the studio. You could almost hear the hum of the air conditioning unit. Joy's lips quivered and she stammered, but nothing came out. She was completely unable to respond in her own set. But Reba wasn't quite done with her demonstration yet. You want to talk about using your platform in a constructive way? Reba asked, her voice soaring with intensity. Then let's talk about you. Every day, you go on air and you tear down the country instead of coming together. You turn a large percentage of our nation into enemies instead of fellow Americans who just have different viewpoints. This was not just an impassioned defense of her audience, it was a blatant expose on the hypocrisy within daytime television. Joy Behar had made a mistake poking the bear, and she was learning that country music's finest could pack a serious punch. You turned politics into a bloody circus. Then, on top of that, you lecture everyone on the need for unity and understanding. That's not, I don't, Joy stammered, now caught completely off guard. We're discussing important issues here. We hold people accountable. No, Joy. You attack people. That is not accountability. There's a difference. Reba's words cut like a knife. She was no longer just defending herself. She was attacking the very concept the show represented. Holding someone accountable is an attempt to achieve a fair discussion with someone with differing opinions, Reba explained evenly. Your version of holding someone accountable is character assassination, disguised as some kind of crusade. You have weaponized moral outrage and used it to punish anyone who dares to have beliefs different from yours. Joy glanced frantically at her co-hosts, searching for a lifeboat, but there was only an unnerving silence. Even her staunchest allies seemed momentarily shocked by the sheer force of Reba's critique. The seasoned interviewer had become the one trying to flee. "I think," Joy mumbled, her voice cracking, "that we've gotten off course here. This was supposed to be a discussion about your music." "Oh no," Reba replied with a grim smile. "You began this, Joy. You chose to turn an interview about my music into a political battle. You assumed that because I'm from Oklahoma, I sing country music, I'd be easy prey for your standard assault. But there's one thing I've learned about making assumptions, Joy. You look incredibly foolish when you're wrong." A ripple went through the live audience, and several people were actually nodding their heads in agreement with Reba. Joy could feel the entire room, every bit of it, slipping through her fingers. The immense control she had exerted over that set for years was being lost right there and then. "You're twisting my words," Joy insisted desperately, clinging to any semblance of dignity she could. "I never called you easy prey. Didn't you?" Reba relaxed her body as if at ease, utterly in control of the entire broadcast. "From the minute you launched into this interview, you have belittled me, made assumptions about my audience, questioned my principles, and expected me to stand here and justify my entire existence to your satisfaction. I don't know what you'd call that, Joy, but I'm guessing you wouldn't call that treating me like a difficult target." Joy's hands were shaking so badly that she could barely pick up her water glass. The ruthless daytime queen was crumbling before her very eyes on live television. The woman who made her living tearing guests down with her quick wit and moral rectitude was finally discovering how it felt to be the one shredded by a truly masterful takedown. Just when Joy figured it couldn't get any worse, Reba delivered a line that seemed to put everything in perspective. "You know what is truly sad here, Joy?" Reba asked, her voice now softer, as though she were conveying a great personal disappointment rather than simply delivering an insult. "You had an actual opportunity today to engage with someone who has connected with millions of ordinary Americans over the past 40 years. But instead, you reduced it to a cheap ambush because you thought it might be good for some viral video." "I wasn't ambushing you," Joy weakly protested, the words without any real conviction behind them. "I was asking good-faith questions about relevant topics." "No, you weren't asking good-faith questions, Joy," Reba responded with surgical precision. "You were making statements, masquerading as questions. There's a difference between asking, 'What do you think of social issues?' and 'How do you justify performing for people with backwards values?' One's inviting a conversation, the other's an accusation in disguise." The other co-hosts sat, shell-shocked and gasping silently, as they were forced to watch their colleague's colleague get systematically eviscerated on live television by someone that they all clearly underestimated. But Joy wasn't going down without a fight, desperate to grasp one more fragile anchor. "But I mean, Reba, you can't possibly say you understand why it might matter to the public, where celebrities are concerned about pressing social issues." "Of course I can understand that, Joy," Reba answered back with an almost pitiable tone. "But there's a dignified way to go about learning what those issues are and how people of diverse backgrounds approach them. And then there's what you've done here today. You've immediately assumed the worst about me and about my audience and about everyone associated with me without any knowledge. You didn't want to learn my perspective. You wanted to broadcast what you already believe are my faults." Joy's face had turned a blotchy red and her breathing had gotten shallow as the heat mounted. "That is not true. I respect differing viewpoints." Reba let out a quiet but undeniably sharp laugh. "Joy, in 15 minutes, you've accused me of giving the green light to backwards fan behavior, stated that I'm endorsing dangerous social forces, that my entire industry is racist and has blood on its hands, and that my entire existence questions the integrity of the human race. If this is your version of respecting different viewpoints, I'd hate to see what your idea of insulting looks like." The studio audience's muted whispers of approval for Reba had turned into murmurs of outright assent. The crowd, who Joy had presumed would be in her corner in New York City, had utterly turned against her and was, now more than ever, siding with her Oklahoma guest. "You're mischaracterizing my statements," Joy faltered slightly. "I never said your fans have backwards values, didn't you?" Reba coolly reached in her pocket and pulled out her phone. After a cursory glance, she said calmly, "I believe your actual phrasing was that my fans vote against their own self-interest and are promoting backward values. Would you like me to have the producer cue that up and play it for the audience right now?" Panic flared in Joy's eyes. She hadn't realized in her rush to make a compelling argument against Reba how easily her words would be turned back against her on live TV. I was making a generalized statement about political voting patterns, she stammered, utterly cornered. Not personally attacking anyone, but the deed was done. Joy Behar had expected an easy layup with a soft, compliant interviewee, but had been handed a full-court press by the most powerful woman in country music, who not only didn't play by her rules, but utterly rewrote them for the entire broadcast. The voice of Reba was steady, but not in any way gentle. I said, "Stop. You look ridiculous right now. I will say this again. You will say what you believe and not try to backpedal or deny your statement. At the very least, have the courage of your convictions." The quiet was deafening. Joy sat still, mouth half open, completely out of all ammunition and idea. For the first time in decades on national television, she was rendered completely and utterly speechless. But Reba wasn't done with this lesson in humiliation. "I know exactly what I think happened today," said Reba, filling the silence, with a voice that captured the entire studio in an instant. "I think you have been in your ivory tower of ideological uniformity for too long to comprehend that intelligent, good people see the world differently than you do. You have spent years surrounded by those who parrot every single political talking point you make. And frankly, you have gotten lazy with your thinking. But that isn't fair," stammered Joy on an attempted, but weak rebuttal. "Fair?" Reba raised her eyebrows. "Joy, your entire interview was unfair. You have been demeaning, presumptuous, condescending, frankly quite rude, and frankly, just obnoxious. I came into your show as your guest, and you have conducted this as if you were my interrogator with me as the defendant at your mock, moralistic trial, where you sit as judge and jury." Whoopi, who had been frozen with a look of horror upon her face, finally began to say, "Ladies, please, we need to go to break." "No," interrupted Reba, as she stopped the co-host with her hand held up. "I believe the viewers deserve to witness how this situation concludes. You started something here, Joy, and you are going to witness the complete end to it." Can you imagine the total panic in that studio control room? The producers were now watching as the country music icon takes over their live broadcast in an instant. Joy frantically looked around her in every direction, searching for any way out. No luck was had. The cameras continued to roll. Her co-host said nothing. Joy was utterly alone. "I just want people to think critically about the issues that influence their everyday lives," whined Joy, one last desperate, weak, and frankly pathetic attempt to retrieve some fragment of something from the smoking rubble of her interview. "And there it is," smiled Reba with a tinge of sad understanding. "You want people to think critically, only so they come up with the exact conclusions you have. That isn't critical thinking, Joy. That is indoctrination. Critical thinking is understanding that intelligent, good people may have the exact same data before them as anyone else, and still arrive at different conclusions." Joy let her head drop. All of the air, arrogance, moral superiority had vanished with the stark and undeniable reality of Reba's statement. Joy looked like a completely deflated balloon. Reba McEntire not only survived a verbal onslaught, but in doing so she peeled back the layers of daytime television and revealed its inner sanctum for the whole world to see. How did you think Reba handled this live interview? Did Joy Behar finally get the reality check she has deserved for a long time? Tell us what you think in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis of the most intense moments in television history. I will see you all in the next video. "Here's what I need people to understand," said Reba, as her tone softened into the familiar, loving one that millions of people have adored her for generations. "We don't need to have identical points of view on every single issue for people to still respect each other. We don't need to hold the exact same political beliefs to recognize our common humanity. However, this thing that we saw here today, this presumption that if someone disagrees with you on a particular issue, they must be unintelligent or evil, that's what's going to kill this country." The audience on hand were completely rapt at this point in the conversation. One woman on the far end of the room let out a soft yes, and applause began, slowly at first, then growing into a roaring, standing ovation. Joy sat totally rigid and would not look up from her hands at all. She was totally humiliated and totally defeated in her own arena. "I came here to talk about music," said Reba, as the applause began to subside a little. "Music, that is. A thing that unites, that crosses political lines, that defies cultural and economic barriers. If there was a little bit more music in the world, and a lot less of this, we'd probably be better off." Joy looked up finally, with a pair of moist, teary, embarrassed eyes. Her eyes were bright with a silent rage, and her mouth opened as if to speak one last time, before she firmly closed it. She knew that there was not one more thing she could say to fix anything that had happened here, or to fix anything at all that had just happened. She could only make things infinitely worse, and the cameras showed it all. A woman who built a career out of cornering and belittling everyone she interviewed was now on the receiving end, and doing so in the most public and spectacular fashion possible. And with the mercy cut to commercial, America at home witnessed one more image that it's not likely to forget. Joy Behar sitting totally dumbfounded and defeated, while Reba McEntire had just delivered arguably one of the greatest, most articulate and devastating clapbacks in daytime talk show history. That's exactly what happens when a host tries to demean, lecture, and bully an American icon. What you have just witnessed was a masterclass on how to verbally knock down a media bully. With sheer grace, intelligence, and class, Reba didn't just win this exchange, she fully exposed the emptiness behind the culture war. And what did you guys think? Be sure to hit the subscribe button for more incredible, unedited, and exclusive moments like this. And down below in the comments, be sure to let me know who you think came out of this more poorly. Joy for her obvious prejudice and arrogance, or the producers and the network for allowing this absolute train wreck to air in the first place. Let us know down below, and we'll see you in the next one.